So this is Case Johnston. This is the Literally Podcast. We're talking again with Teresa Dovalpage about her new book. I got it right here.
Case, you have a new book out. Tell everyone about it.
Yes, the new book is called Let the Wild Grasses Grow. It's inspired by my grandma and grandpa Cordova, Della Chavez and John Cordova, and it's kind of a look at what would happen to them if these two favorite people in my life lived, well, they did live during the 1920s, but what could I envision happen to them throughout that time? You can pick it up at torreyhousepress.org or anywhere else that you buy your books, preferably independent bookstores. Thanks. I got it right here. Death and it's the Perseids. Is the Perseids?
Well, I wasn't sure myself how to pronounce it because I have heard the two pronunciations, Perseids. So I said, whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Perseids. All right, we'll see if that works for me. Teresa was born in Havana, Cuba. She earned her BA in English literature and an MA in Spanish literature at the University of Havana, and her PhD in Latin American literature at the University of New Mexico. She is the author of 13 other books of fiction and 3 plays, and is the winner of the Rincón de la Victoria Award and a finalist for the Heralde Award. Is it the Heralde Award? And she lives in New Mexico. And this is the second time we get to talk to Teresa, and it's always a pleasure. We talked probably, but gosh, it's probably been a year and a half or 2 years ago when we did the first book or the other book of your multiple books. And Teresa's going to read a little bit from the new book today, and then we're going to chat about it. Of course, chat about mystery and chat about the sequels that are coming out, because I want to know the answers to all of them before she even gets to publish them. So go ahead and let's hear some of the book.
Okay, so I start. Las lágrimas de San Lorenzo. That's what we call them in Spanish. In English, it's a Perseids meteor shower. I prefer the tears of St. Lawrence, though they remind me of those I shed for my Lorenzo, who died roasted like his namesake. Do you know the story of St. Lawrence the Martyr? He was a Roman deacon, condemned to be burnt alive in a guillotine. In the middle of his torment, he said to the executioner, "I'm well done on this side. You can turn me over now." What did Lorenzo say while he was being cooked? Did he suffer? Did he ever forgive me? And now we go to chapter 1. The cruise ship Narwhal, all 12 decks of her, towered above the terminal building. It had a festive air, with the hull painted white and bright ribbons of red, yellow, and green flashed all over. From a distance, it looked like a giant tropical bird that had inexplicably landed on water. August in Miami was, as usual, 94 degrees, with a devilish mix of heat and humidity that made you want to crawl inside a refrigerator. The Nautilus instructions said to be at Terminal B before noon, but it was well past 1 and the line to enter the building wasn't moving. It was worse than being an airport for Dios. Then I remembered that we had no right to complain. After all, we had gotten the cruise for free. I was still scratching my head about the whole thing. It all began when a young woman showed up at Pretty and Pampered, the pet grooming salon where I worked part-time, asking for me. She looked like a teenager, but dressed professionally in a beige suit, and introduced herself as a Nautilus representative. I was getting ready to give a summer cut to Standard Poodle when she presented me with an embossed envelope and quit. "Congratulations, Miss Spivey, you just won 2 cruise tickets to Havana." I was born and raised in Havana. After marrying Nolan in 2008, I had returned many times to visit my grandmother, but never thought of taking a cruise back. And in July 2017, sailing to Cuba was the last thing on my mind. "I've won what?" I asked. The poodle took advantage of my surprise to get away and hide under a chair. "A couple of tickets." The girls shocked perky as could be. About the Narwhal, our most popular ship. The cruise is departing on August the 10th. Nature's Cruise Line had started to offer short cruises that included Cuba in their itineraries, she explained. They were carrying out their biggest ever promotional campaign with many giveaways. I was one of the lucky winners. Cool, eh? What that chick didn't say was how and where I had signed up for the raffle or whatever it was that I had won. Okay, so that's how it starts. And then we find out exactly what happens when Mercedes gets in that cruise ship that she wasn't really that sure she had entered in the raffle that she won.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing from the beginning because we get the mystery. I mean, there's a mystery, like how do you get on a cruise ship? And the funny thing when I thought about this is you get these phone calls all the time or emails where they say you actually won, and you never return them. You think, no, I don't remember like putting my name in that, and I know that it's a scam. And I think while reading that first part, I thought this is a scam. This has got to be a scam. And I think for the readers, I think that's something you wanted, wasn't it? Kind of that initial gut feeling.
Yeah, well, I wanted to create that suspense. Is it a legitimate offer or there is something obscure there? And then, of course, I wanted the reader to think that there was something suspicious about the whole thing, but not to know exactly what it was.
Yeah, and then your protagonist, Mercedes, she goes on to the cruise with her current husband, who is, of course, another wrinkle. And I think it's not getting too far into it by saying this, but another wrinkle, of course, is he's just lost his job. He's kind of looking for other work, and so they're having issues. And so then we're thrown on a cruise ship to Cuba, and my question with this too is, again, and I love the mysteries, I mean, I could never write mystery. I can never write fantasy or sci-fi. I know that, but where did this one come from? And I mean, in the book, you lay it out really well of why it needs to be a cruise ship instead of a flight, something easy to get there. There needs to be an extended travel or stuck on the boat or whatever it might be. But where did this one come from? And then if you wanted to chat a little bit about the sequels that are on their way and where you are with those, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, the idea came from cruises that I have taken. My husband and I love to go on cruises because everything is there. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about excursions. Everything is planned. But I always go looking around like what shenanigans are going on while we are here. And there is always that in the back of my mind, like, well, if something were to happen here, we are all trapped together. We cannot go anywhere. We cannot escape the ship. And so that's kind of where the original idea came from when we were in a cruise ship ourselves. And at the same time, it was when the first cruises to Cuba started. So I think 2016 or 2018, early 2018. Then, of course, I like to write about Cuba. And so, let's see what happens in a cruise to Cuba. It's a very short cruise, but lots of things can happen in this a couple of days that it takes to get there.
And it would just be a couple days, right? Because you're leaving from Miami and heading south, obviously. And so was the first year is 2018 where they started making that trip from Miami?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I went and consulted the itinerary with a real itinerary, and most of them were cruises that included Cuba. There were some that were just to Cuba, and there were some like the one that I described in the novel that went to Cuba, and then the Bahamas, and just a short Caribbean cruise of several islands. So yeah, it was taken from a real cruise itinerary.
And I love the idea of like being on the cruise ship, and because you do see weird things. Like we've gone on a few, and you always kind of like, if you stay up late enough, you're going to see some really, really random weird things on cruises. Since our boy is so young, it's been a long time since I've stayed up late enough. But I remember just walking through the cruise, and you're right, it's like a little city. And anything can happen in a little city, especially a little city where everybody is absolutely trapped in the little city. And so was when you're thinking about this mystery, well, when you were on a cruise, were you thinking, oh my gosh, this is great because, the world is so small. It's a small world to write within, and that's a benefit, right?
Yeah, and well, part of the story is also that I have a friend who went on a cruise to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I made it realistic enough, because the entertainment that I described and the world, that I tried to recreate was based on a real
Mm-hmm.
cruise that went to Cuba. The one that she went to was the people to people programs that was established, I think, it was either 2016 or 17. And so the entertainment and the fact that people were not really supposed to do a lot on their own, but they work with guides most of the time. So I try to replicate what happens in real life in the little world that I created in the novel.
Mm-hmm. Where did you get this idea? I find it interesting, but where did you get this idea for? And I don't want to give too much away, but it comes pretty early on, where the novel is stolen and then printed in somebody else's name, and as from a writer's perspective, that's like, oh my gosh, that sounds like the worst thing in the entire world, where somebody writes a novel and somebody steals it and publishes it, and it becomes like famous and like a cultural icon, which the book kind of becomes within the book. Was this a
Well, that's the worst nightmare that we can have as writers, no?
Yeah,
so I
is.
guess that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, what's your worst nightmare? And it's like, well, I'm just going to make it come true, because anybody who's a writer read that and was like, no, that's the worst thing ever. And was that sparked by anything, or was it just sparked by your own nightmares?
Well, that part of the book, now that I think of it, also came during a conversation I had from a Cuban friend of mine, and he said, we are so isolated here. Sometimes we are so unprotected that somebody can steal my manuscript and I will never have proof that it was mine,
mm-hmm.
because there is so little access to internet. Well, there is more now, but even up to 4 years ago, it was really difficult. So we don't have them. No, I sent the manuscript and you can prove it by looking at my email. But so it was that sense of not being super protected in Cuba, that you don't have anything like copyright. Somebody can take the book. So I think that was in the back of my mind when I was writing the book, that conversation I had with my friend, who is a Cuban writer.
Yeah, so not too long ago, it would have been just a hard copy that somebody would have had and could have easily stolen. Because this is in the 2000s, so this is not that long ago at all. That's interesting to know. That's really interesting to know. When did so you said like 4 years ago, but when did like internet access really become really available in Cuba?
I'd say like 10 years ago it started.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really in the last 3 or 4 years that people are doing what they call the directas, that is a live transmission, and it has been used in the demonstrations, the recent demonstrations. People were able in Cuba to get the word all over. Oh, see what's happening here, thanks to the internet. But even 10 years ago, it wasn't that easy, because the internet access was so limited and many people didn't have cell phones. So yeah.
Are there still a lot of restrictions now, or is it pretty open?
There are still a lot of restrictions, and it's really difficult because it's only one company called ETEXA that controls all the internet access. So if ETEXA decides to just delete an account or block an account, there is nothing you can do. And of course, ETEXA is owned by the government.
Right. And that changes everything. That changes the freedoms of the internet and everything. That's really, really interesting. And I wanted to ask a question about the size of Havana, because like within the book, there's a search, there's a search for someone in the book. I won't give it away. With the size of that city, is it still easily navigable to really go out and look for somebody, or or is it too big to be able to maybe just find somebody like a needle in a haystack thing?
Well, it depends on which part of the city you are. So in Old Havana, where the ship arrives, is El Puerto de La Habana. That area is very easy to walk.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of difficult to get lost in Old Havana, no, because there is the port, there is the ocean there,
Mm-hmm.
and in the really old part of the city where the cathedral is, and all the real streets around it. So that area is is kind of easy to navigate by on foot.
Yeah.
Now, when we get to Centro Habana, where I used to live,
Mm-hmm.
and to La Quinta de los Molinos, which is a it's like kind of a botanical garden, and well, it plays a very important role in the story. It is quite easy to get lost inside
Mm-hmm.
that botanical garden because it's kind of big for at least for Havana, and there are so many trees and corners. It when I was a child, I grew up like 3 blocks from La Quinta de los Molinos.
Mm-hmm.
There was kind of like a wetland, a place that we were always told, no, don't get there because you can sink
Mm-hmm.
in como un pantano, like a swamp. Era el pantano de la Quinta. I don't think that exists anymore. I think they dried that zone, but it always had that aura of mystery
Mm-hmm.
that something bad could happen there. Don't get too close. Now it's more a touristy place at this point. I was there 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. That was the last place I visited,
Mm-hmm.
was Havana to see my mother. And it looks much better now, but it still is not a place that you'd like to visit at night.
Right.
And there are no lights. The only lights are in the street. But once you enter the botanical garden, that is protected by fence, an iron fence and a gate. Once you enter there,
It could be really sketchy, or you just kind of don't want to be there at night, and which makes sense for the book too, because somebody could disappear. Somebody could disappear pretty easily, especially if they don't know their way around at all. Which I love that part. Well, I'm not going to give too much away because it is a mystery. I wanted to ask too a lot about your protagonist, like Mercedes. She, I think, at the heart of this book, she feels so much shame. I mean, for so many different reasons. And then kind of places blame on herself because of that shame all the way through. And just from my reading, that really kind of kept her from seeing things clearly with all of her relationships. Where did you come up with her? And am I reading that right? The part with her, she just kind of blames herself for so many things where that's really not her.
yeah, well, Mercedes is based on several real people that I know. And yeah, there is always that sense that, at least in a couple of cases, that they gave up a lot to come here.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they say, well, what is if I had not taken this road? Would my life be different? So, and did I do the right thing? I think most of us that have left our countries always have this question: did we do the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of Mercedes, there is shame and there is guilt because there was love involved.
Yeah.
And so that changes the game. And I try to portray her as kind of a sympathetic character.
Mm-hmm.
She's not really taking advantage of the guy that she uses her husband not to get out of Cuba, but she's not totally blameless either.
Right.
And it's that position in which many of us were in Cuba. We want to live. How do we live? There are limited options, and well, Mercedes uses her beauty as a way to get out of Cuba. But I try to be balanced. I mean, there was that element that still kind of comes back to make her feel ashamed of what she did,
Mm-hmm.
ditching her boyfriend for this American guy. But there is also part of the love. She was also attracted to her husband because, well, was un Americano, no, the power thing. So in that sense, I try to be as fair as I could with my character, not una aprovechada, somebody just taking advantage of guys, but not an innocent over he died.
Sure. Well, and I thought I found her move through kind of like her memories as really authentic, because we've all done that. I mean, haven't we? We've all kind of like made decisions about love 20, 30 years ago. And with those decisions, you know, of course, at the time we feel like it's the right thing, but then of course we doubt everything ever, you know, since, you know, we say, well, I don't know if that was, I loved that person, but that person wasn't right for me at that time. And we make a decision, and then 30 years later, you know, or well, in her case, it wasn't much too many years later, that she doubts herself, you know, and she feels that blame for it. But I think that's really real. Like you said, it's like, we're not all, you know, she's not all bad and she's not all good, and she's responsible for her decisions as well, but she's not responsible for other things too. So that's what I liked about it. But she really did, like, she mulled this stuff over in her brain a lot. She was asking herself, what did I do? What did I do? Why did I do that? Over and over again. And I think that made for a really intriguing, like, time with her throughout the book that went, you know, really, really quickly, where she's like, oh, she did love him, and she also loved her husband, and then she almost had an affair with somebody else, but then she didn't, and she just really mulls that over, and I think that's really, really human, you know, with her. So I'm thinking with your, okay, so we kind of talked the other day, and you wrote this one, and this was a complete book, but then now we have sequels on the horizon. Where are you? And that's got to be great. First off, that's congratulations. That's wonderful.
Gracias.
Yeah. And then, you know, where are you? And when did, I mean, is it easy? Is it easy to create a sequel on a book that you never planned writing a sequel about?
Well, in this case, it was kind of set up in advance. There is a part about Mercedes' mother that at the end of this book says, well, I want to go back and look for my mother, because in several occasions in this book, it is mentioned the fact that her mother disappeared when Mercedes was a little girl. So I thought, well, that I'm going to just leave it a little murky here. We will not exactly what happens, because that's what's going to be the plot of the next book. The tentative title, the working title, is Last Seen in Havana, because that's the last place where Mercedes' mother was seen. And so she goes back to see her grandmother and to look for her mother. And that's the plot of the second book, the one that I'm working on right now. And then, of course, we see the same characters. We see the grandmother, Mamina, right, Mercedes, and Candela, her friend, that this time Candela goes with her to Cuba, but they don't go on a cruise this time.
Yeah, what about the taxi driver? Does he make an appearance in the next? Oh yeah, because I really liked his character, and I was thinking at first, like, is this guy gonna be shady? Is he gonna turn around and be like, is he gonna, you know, trick them? But he didn't. He was just kind of kind, and I liked that, and he helped him out. And the character keeps asking, well, how do you know all these things? And he says, well, I was this and I was this beforehand. But he'll be in the second book. Is that what you're saying? Because
Satya Deva will also help me portray a side of Cuba that not many people know about, which is the metaphysical movement there. Right. In the 90s, when there was a little bit more of freedom of religion, up to 1991, I would say, going to church, any church, was not advisable. It was not well regarded. It's really that you could get in trouble. But then in the 90s, when the Pope went to Cuba, that started opening a little bit, and then a lot of metaphysical groups flourished at that time. At that time, nobody was talking yet about the law of attraction, but there was the positive thinking and manifestation and visualization and all that. And it was incredible, the amount of people that were interested in that, because it had been suppressed for so long. So in this second book, and probably in the third one, because there will be a third one, that is a topic, is this grupos metafísicos and the things that happened there. Most of the times people think of Cuba and think Santeria, the voodoo thing.
Sure.
And I'm guilty of using it a lot in my novels too, because, well, that's a part of our culture. But what people don't know is about the metaphysical side of Cuba.
Yeah, and that's like you said, it's like a renaissance of any time of spirituality in the last last 10 years, 5 years for this?
Probably 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
In the early 90s, and with the help of groups from different countries, it has now become a big movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to read those. I mean, I will get early copies of those, of course. You can't do like a Stephen King thing with Misery, where you kill off the main character, because people will get really mad at that. They'll get really and I don't want anybody coming after you with like a hammer.
No.
I don't want your number one fan coming and like, breaking your feet to bring Mercedes back.
That wouldn't be nice.
No.
But let me tell you something. We used to meet at La Quinta de los Molinos, in the metaphysical group that I belong to, because of course I was in a couple of groups. One was a Quaker group, and the other one that was related to that one in a way, but on its own, it was called Los Maestros, La Llama Violeta y los Maestros Ascendidos, the Violet Flame and the Ascended Masters. And we used to have our meetings during the day at La Quinta de los Molinos, that place where something bad happens in Perseids, because that was kind of a protected area in that sense, that we could be there and nobody would bother us or ask, well, what are you doing there meditating? But so yeah, now I just remember that. That's where our Grupo Metafísico used to meet.
And that'll be part of the third book. So I'm excited. I'm really excited. Brandon's given us the 5 minutes. But is there anything else you want to talk about with the book, with the series, with your characters? I love the book. It was a very fast read, of course. But is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't really touch on in the last little bit here?
Well, just that I get really attached to my characters. I didn't know this was going to happen, because with the other books that I have written, well, one book was done, that's it. But with Mercedes, I felt that like she was a friend, and Candela. So I said, no, I need to continue with them. And that's why the second book. And now that I'm almost done with the second book,
yes,
I'm like, I know, but we are amiguitas now. Let's go on with the third one. And one thing that I'm doing is I'm going back in time. So like a Perseids text, is it Perseids? No, that's the right word. Perseids? Perseidas. That one happens in 2017. Now, part of the plot of the next one, well, part is when Mercedes goes back to Cuba, so it could be 2018, but it's about her mother, and that takes place in the 80s. Her mother is an American who went to Cuba to live in the 80s, the late 80s. So is Cuba seen during that interesting decade? And the third one will probably take place at the beginning of the 20th century. So I think I'm going just like back in time.
Yeah, that's exciting. And like you said, you get to fall in love with this character and stay with them. I mean, there's characters, well, in novels that are not published of mine that I fell in love with, and I'm just like, I wish I could still write about that character, but they're dead. They're dead on my computer somewhere. But maybe, you never know. Maybe I'll resurrect one of my favorite characters that never got published and start again. That's the hope. That's the dream, right? This is Case Johnston. This is a Literally podcast. We're podcasting from the Monarch One in historic 25th Street. Our guest today is Teresa Dovalpage, and we're talking about her new book, Death Under the Perseids. It comes out like December.
December the 8th, yeah.
Yeah. So go pre-order. Pre-orders are so important. Pick up the book, and we'll be back to talk with Teresa again with book 2 and 3. I promise. If she'll join us again, and we're starting a new project together, so she's stuck with me for a while. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for joining us again, and thank you for the time mess up I had. I could have sworn I sent it, but my brain's been a little bit crazy lately.
Muchas gracias.